Are you satisfied that the current ways of measuring passenger satisfaction are adequate and do really relate properly to how passengers actually feel about journeys they undertake?
I understand there's currently a biannual survey conducted by the NRPS, which, fine as far as it goes. I think we can be more innovative over how we seek to capture the customer experience. There are a number of pilot projects underway, all of which I want to evaluate. I think we need to look at whether we do things that are more frequent, that capture a broader range of measurements than what is currently in the existing survey, and also captures how people's perceptions change over the course of a journey. So whether, departure on board at the station, and capture that entire experience, and perhaps have less pass-fail, more qualitative measurements as well, to understand, I hate the word granular, but the more granular aspect of what occurs on any journey, particularly around safety and security issues, which I want to give more attention to as well.
And what about overcrowding? That's a great concern on some journeys, and the department does have some kind of measure on acceptable overcrowding, doesn't it, in terms of peak time journeys and others. Can you tell us about that and how you actually monitor that?
Would you like to talk to the acceptable overcrowding measure?
Yes, Mr. Wilkinson.
Yes, so we do monitor overcrowding on trains, and we do know obviously which trains are the most heavily loaded, and when we reach a situation of very seriously overloaded trains, that is at the point at which we discuss the capacity being provided on the network with the operator. Although I must say, generally speaking, it is the industry usually that comes to us first, so that the industry generally understands what the crowding limitations are on vehicles and what is an acceptable level of crowding. When we find that trains are at risk of becoming overcrowded, the industry is very good at coming forwards and talking to us about how to procure additional capacity. So, for example, we've recently intervened on the C2C railway to procure additional capacity there. We are doing so similarly on South Eastern, and that is all because we are seeing, actually across the network, if I'm honest, very serious levels of demand growth, which is putting tremendous pressure on train capacity across the network. And in fact, by the end of 2019, there will be something in the region of 3,800 additional vehicles coming onto the network because of the work we do to understand the crowding on our services across the network.
And will that meet the projected need? I mean, in some services now, the level of overcrowding is acute, and passengers are extremely concerned about it. They sometimes feel their safety is being jeopardised. It's extremely uncomfortable journeys.
Yes.
And it is a major issue, but that doesn't seem to come through on some of the passenger surveys.
So you raise very, very fair and pertinent questions in this area. This is probably, I think, the biggest challenge that the rail industry faces today in providing the additional capacity to match the demand requirements of the public of the rail services.
How much do you assess we need to invest in producing that additional capacity over, let's say, the next 20 years?
We do have forecast projections for 20 years, but what I can tell you is that the current level of investment going into the fleet to provide the capacity that I've outlined, the additional 3,800 vehicles taking us up to 2019, does provide the capacity required to keep the industry within its crowding limits. But we all forecast that if demand carries on at the rate it is today, we will continue to need, for many years to come, to continue investing in train capacity. There's no question about that.
Minister, did you want to
He stole my statistic over the number of new carriages, but I've made the point that your earlier inquiry regarding digital technology is, I think, key to enhancing capacity on the network, because then we'll reach a point where we physically can't accommodate more train paths. So we'll need to look towards more innovation in terms of digital signalling that will then enable us to try to fit more trains on what is essentially a limited geographic space.
Are you satisfied, Minister, that the current anticipated level of investment over future years will in fact be enough to resolve this issue?
I will want to review all the franchise agreements to look at that precise question, and equally make sure that the franchises that we're about to start tendering also contain more than adequate investment in new rolling stock. I'm acutely conscious from a northern perspective the need, for example, to eradicate the out-of-date pacers. That's a very good example of why we have to keep pushing harder when it comes to rolling stock.
And I think it's worth also adding, of course, the investment also, if you take into account the investment in infrastructure that's happening, Network Rail in our major projects, the Intercity Express programme, Thameslink, Crossrail, High Speed 2, these are all adding to the capacity of the network, and they are all very much focused on this. So there is an extremely significant amount of investment already happening. Of course, there will always be cries for more when growth in demand continues at the rate that it is, but it has been an enormous priority, and we do have a huge investment programme now underway.
And I would like to place on record, I think it is a good thing that more people are travelling by rail. That is a good thing. We need to make sure that we can accommodate and that continued increase, which shows no sign of levelling off.
But will the increases that you're telling us about, the increased capacity, improve passengers' experiences, or will it be a lot more trains still as crowded as trains are today?
Well, we also seek to use the franchise specifications to improve quality on board as well. So there will be numerous ways that we can improve the passenger experience when a passenger is actually on board, through mobile connectivity, through Wi-Fi, through, each franchise is a different beast with different requirements. We can utilise the franchise specification process to drive those improvements. That's what I would look to do, that not only do we have new rolling stock with extra seats, which is a better experience as well when you are on board.
Mr Vickers.
Thank you, Chairman. Who's actually to blame for the fact that the industry is so short of rolling stock? It's not a new problem.
I'm not sure on day 3 that I wish to speculate as to the answer. Whether one of my two colleagues might like to as a matter for them. It's a very pertinent question, though.
So I think there are lots of compounding issues here. One is that when we privatised the industry, we did so on a premise that didn't make it easy to vary contracts and procure new assets. That is something we've worked hard on and are changing and are improving. At the same time, the average age of the fleet in this country has been allowed to grow to a point where the trains that we've had in service over the last 20 to 30 years really have not provided the kind of capacity that demand is calling for. So the work that we're doing in franchising at the moment is to do two things. It is to give the industry foresight as to the department's view of what level of standard of quality of rolling stock we anticipate needing for the future, and the kinds of manufacturing train platforms that we'd expect the industry to be coming forwards with. And some trains, for example, will need to be much more metro-style higher capacity vehicles. Other trains will, on longer distance routes, will need to be longer, but of a higher quality of interior fitment and finish and facility. And we are setting those requirements out in a document that we produce. We update it regularly. It's called our Rolling Stock Market Perspective. That is a new innovation that the department has come forward with, and is beginning to get the industry to really work together to think about a long-term future. So we are seeing in franchising today orders coming forwards for new rolling stock in a way that we haven't done over the last 20 years. And the rate and change of replacement and renewal and refurbishment of trains coming through the system now is, in comparative terms, extraordinary and to be welcomed.
It's worth noting in many the franchise specifications, not only are we ordering new train carriages, but upgrading the refitting of existing carriages to the same standards. So we are looking to level it up across the fleet as a whole.
I mean, it's encouraging to hear what we've just heard, and the fact that there'll be 3,800 vehicles in 3 years' time. But it goes back to my earlier question. It's rather depressing to find that the industry needs guidance, actually, from DFT, if I understood what's just been said, as to what type of vehicles it needs and what standards. Surely it should just be aiming for higher standards and better customer comfort.
So I think that's a fair challenge, but I do believe that the industry does understand these challenges, actually, and the industry does have its own rolling stock strategy. which is in recent years something that has become a manifest part of the industry's forward strategy, and it is a comprehensive study of the way that the industry is evolving, both in demand characteristics, passenger expectations, taking very great account of the kind of data that comes back through the passenger audits that we do in the industry through Transport Focus, and thinking intelligently about the kind of trains we're going to need in the future. I wouldn't want you also to think that the 3,800 new carriages will come in 2019. They're on their way now, and they're being delivered as we speak.